Good afternoon. Well, that's loud. This is the March 20th, 2025 Public Utility Advisory Board. We'll go ahead and let Christina call roll, please.
Brad Chance,
Present.
Anthony Jeremita,
Here.
Greg McGee, Steve McLuckie,
Present.
Karen Martell,
Here.
Michael Talcott,
Here.
Les Boatright.
Here. Okay, so we got through that. No minutes to approve, so we'll do that at the next meeting. On the discussion list, the first thing here is the IPL governance structure. We didn't meet last month because of the severe weather, and they had sent everybody home to work, so we had nowhere really to meet. That's why we didn't meet last month. But I had asked everybody to send Christina anything they had on governance. I know at the meeting a couple of months ago, I believe, Joe, you did a presentation on the governance structure, just threw out some ideas, some thoughts, and I kind of wanted everybody to give that some thought and see how everybody felt about what was presented. I've got some comments here that I'd like to make on it. Let's just open the discussion to the floor here on, Joe, do you have anything you want to say before we get kind of started discussing this?
No, and I mean, my presentation was really just, let's get something out, let's get a place to start for talking points and, you know, numbers and stuff were pure recommendations, but open for discussion, so.
Right.
Nothing I would say was hard and firm that there's absolutely no movement on. It was meant to spark conversation. So.
Right. And I wanted to go ahead and just get us thinking along the lines of what do we want to see in that, so we have some input, because I want to make sure that the PUAB gets heard in this issue. So I'm going to throw it open to anybody here if they've got comments, questions, anything like that. Okay, Michael?
Okay, I just kind of jotted some things down, and those are the things that I sent to Christina. Okay, the first thing, I think, like DKMT said, they suggested we make this as unpolitical as we can. So the first thing that stood out to me was that the suggestion was to have a council member, voting council member on the PUB. So I think just the fact that the council picks who's going to be on the PUB is your connection. Springfield has an ex officio member who is the previous city manager, but it's non-voting. And then, let's see. Next thing, I think that the 5-member board is too small. I think for our city our size, you've got Springfield who has 11. We're about 25,000 smaller, give or take, than they are. So my suggestion would be a minimum of 9, maybe a minimum of 7. But I think to get a good representation, you need about 9 people. And because the smaller the board, the easier it is to control it. Whoever that is. But it's easier to steer everybody in the direction that it wants to go, that they're wanted to go. Let's see.
Can I ask
Go ahead.
you a
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
The 7 to 9, that would be voting members, right?
Right. And let's see. The Springfield model has a wide representing of the populace. So you've got somebody representing underserved. You've got somebody represent like who's the group that does underserved?
CSO.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So somebody that represents that population. Let's see, I think I got. And then also Springfield's model has that they don't have any, they have it broken up evenly as far as political party. So you have to have an equal number of political party with the exception of one, because obviously it has to be you have to be able to pass something. You can't have a tie vote on everything. So that helps also to keep it non-political. And I think that's about the biggest points I have right now that I can think of.
Okay. Any other comments on the topic?
I agree with Mike on the having a member of the council. I'm okay with having a member of the council being on the board. I don't think they should have a vote. And the 5-member, I like I wouldn't mind seeing 7 members, voting members. 9 might get a little unwieldy. I'd be okay with 9. But I think 7 is kind of the sweet spot.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I agree with you.
Anything from this end of the table?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll let you speak and then.
One thing I noticed was no PUAB or citizen input, and I thought the Springfield model, it looks good to me in many ways, and one is they have a citizen advisory committee that I believe has over 20 members. I'm not suggesting that here, but I think that's something to look at, keeping citizen input as a kind of an official part of it.
Yeah, looking at the notes that I made, I had written notes and I left them at home, so hopefully my cats and dog are looking at it. The size of the board, I know that when Joe threw it out before, it was like 5 members. I'd like to see 2 extra positions added to make it 7. And they don't necessarily have to be from Independence or the area, but somebody with utility experience. Because this is the board that's going to be running IPL, or that's what it's proposed to do. And I think you need somebody with some background in running a utility for that specific need for just the information. A lot of times, I know when I worked at KCP&L, they always had an engineer was a VP because they needed somebody up there that understood how things worked in order to make things run and be efficient. And I just think on this board, and they could be voting members or we could use them in an advisory role. However, but I think we need that expertise on there. Another comment I had was to keep the PUAB. We need that interaction with an advisory board of citizens as we move forward. We've got it now. It's in the city charter. I'd like to see it kept and advise this new board, whatever it is. Couple other things I'm going to throw out here is budget and oversight needs to be with this new board. I don't think it needs to be, we make decisions and then it goes to the council to vote on the budget and that. I think it needs to be with this board. And I believe that's the way a lot of the other boards are run that I've researched. They had hiring, firing capability, maybe hire a GM to run IPL. And they had the ability to hire and fire that person. And they also had budget control over running. If they're going to actually be responsible for running the utility, then they need to be in charge to do that, to have that freedom, and it takes the political nature out of it. Nothing against elected officials. There's 2 in the room. But I just think for this to be efficient and to work properly, we're going to need that.
So how do you see PUAB how are you going to have both those entities? are you gonna have enough people to run? That would be my only concern.
Well, it's stretched to find folks. I know we're stretched on things, but something like this, I think the citizen input from a PUAB type structure will help this board stay grounded and understand what's going on out there. Especially if you've got, business people in, like was proposed before, I think one business person from outside the area that really understood, the business side of working with IPL. We just need to keep the PUAB, I think the citizens' input's really key to this. And there's enough folks out there that I'm sure we can drum up, five to six people for the PUAB, because it's not just IPL that they're gonna be looking at. They're gonna be looking at municipal services and all the other pieces that we look at now.
The only thing that and this brings up, that kind of helped me remember what else I was gonna ask, and that was, I really think that we need to have all voting members be residents of the city. And the reason I say that is because North Point comes to mind. And if you've got somebody representing them and they live out of town, you've got somebody pushing a hard agenda, what they're looking for, and maybe the ratepayers kind of get put aside a little bit. That was,
Well, hopefully it's structured where that would be one voice of however many on the board. And that's something we can talk about and cuss and discuss as we go through this process. It's just some things that I kind of thought we hadn't worked out really all the
Right.
details yet. And that's just some more meat on the bone here that we can kind of chew on. So we just need to think about it and keep talking about it. Any other comments? Throw it open to the room. Anybody here want to say anything on that? Address it? Jump in? Okay.
No, the proposal that was put forth was really just meant to be a place to start a discussion. So
Right,
I
and
think
that's kind of
all
where
these
we've
are-
taken off from.
Yep, absolutely. We'll collect these notes and keep refining what it looks like.
So
Yeah.
I guess an only counter thought, right, is the difficulty that Independence has filling boards now. So
It's tough.
and this isn't, please do not take this as throwing mud, but it's just a reality. How many times in the last 3 years, I've been here 3 years, I've seen the PUAB, for one, filled, and for number two, fully attended
Yep.
a handful of times, right, out of 36 meetings.
Yeah,
So
it's that way on
that's
any
why-
board.
That was, I think, where I came up with the number. And again, it's open for discussion. I'm just trying to provide, that's why I came with a lower number, was because it does us less good to have a board of 9 people that's half filled all the time and half attended, right?
Right.
So really finding the good quality people that are gonna provide good, valid input and be there and attend it, is the most
Yeah.
important thing to me of the board. So-
It seems to be a challenge we have on everything, so it's just something we're gonna have to address and deal with, and what that magic number is, I don't
And-
know.
I
We
mean,
barely
Zach's-
had a quorum last night for stormwater oversight.
Yeah, and I think
It's-
Zach's made plenty of
a standing issue.
presentations on all the commissions that we have within the city and how many empty seats there are at any given time, so, not saying that I don't agree or disagree with the larger number, I'm just telling you that would be the counter to a bigger number board, is the difficulty we have filling the seats, especially if you start putting limitations of it can only be residents, it can only be this, the more limitations you put on those board members, the more difficult it is gonna be to continue to keep it filled and keep a quorum attending.
I think that's especially important if we're looking at continuing the, some kind of citizens advisory. At that point, you're 2 boards in, and what does that configuration look like? And then who is qualified, and which do they serve on, and all the questions that come with that. So just definitely something.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. It's just that IPL is such a, I don't know, put it, a large component of independence. It's also a large budget. There's a lot of people at work. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's a very important piece.
Absolutely.
People can kind of overlook the stormwater or the sidewalks or the parks and still survive. IPL's a little bit different matter when their air conditioning doesn't work or their heater doesn't work. So sometimes it's just how much effort do we put behind it, and importance on it is what we really need to stress.
And I think I think the residents are gonna, I think they're not gonna be too excited to have too many people living outside the city making decisions on what happens to them.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, totally agree.
it'd be like somebody from Evergy, a bunch of people from Evergy saying how we need to run ours. You know, and I mean, living outside the city.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just a lot of things to think about and consider.
So to counter that, instead of an Evergy person, how would you feel if a Springfield person that was on their board? And I know it's outside, but I'm just saying, to Les's point of having municipal governance and electrical experience, you know, an IOU, I get you 1,000% that I personally would not want any IOU person trying to tell IPL how to run, because it's a
That's right.
completely different model. They have completely different goals and, you know, how they run their organization. But in other municipal, so, and again, it's just food for thought. I am not by any means trying to provide debate points. It's just food for thought of, okay, well, are there other avenues that maybe might be acceptable?
You know, when you participate in a study, you want to make sure that when you're looking at the results, you're looking at utilities just like you. They have the tree coverage, they have ice storms, those kind of things all drive those numbers. You don't want to put yourselves up against a bunch of Florida utilities when you're looking at costs of things. And it's the same thing here. You know, we'd pull people in that understand how a muni works versus an IOU, because it's just a different mindset. And that's something that needs to be considered as we move this thing down the road, kick the can down the road. That's just things to think about. Okay, anything else? I think we'll just make that a kind of a standing item, Christina, on our agenda as we move forward, for any other comments, questions, things, thoughts people have come up with. And certainly if the council has any questions, Bridget or Jared, you know, in the future, please come to us and let's have a good discussion on it.
I was gonna wait until later to mention this, but I'll just mention it now. So the council is gonna get together in April and discuss this topic for a specific meeting connected just to that. You know, if you reach any conclusions prior to that, you know, that would be, you know, I think good information to have. But I think the council's gonna get together and start the discussion. There's not gonna be decisions made at that point. But
Will that be a public meeting?
it'll be a public meeting, yes.
Well, there may be a few here that want to try to set in. Are you, at some point, going to bring in like DMKT or somebody to?
DKMT is gonna be there, yeah. The lady that presented on that to the council.
What was
is
her
gonna
name?
be there. I can't remember.
Heather Bailey.
Heather Bailey.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, great. Well, that'll be, sometimes it's good to bring in somebody that's experienced it before, kind of an impartial outsider to take a look at it and kind of just talk about things to consider. So I think that'll be a good start. All right, thank you. Okay, have we beat that one to death? Okay. How about strategic plan for the PUAB? That's an item that I still need to get all the minutes that were approved from last year so I can move forward to write the strategic plan so we can present it to the council per the charter. I'd like to have had it done well before now, but I'll keep talking to Christina about the minutes and stuff, and we'll just move that forward. Hopefully we'll get that put together in a decent time, and then just know moving forward, we'll try to improve on the process. That means it's the first time that it's been done. I don't know that anybody's ever given a strategic plan or report to the council. So we'll break ground. It just may be a while. So that's really all I've got. Any questions, comments? How about capital improvement projects, the updated fiscal year 25-26 capital improvement projects?
Do you want me to go first? Sure. Okay.
I know one of the things that Christina handed out, if you all saw this, it was kind of a condensed version of the capital improvement plan, grouped by like municipal services and stuff, because the actual capital improvement plan, I understand, was quite cumbersome and not user-friendly. So this is more of a stripped-down version that's more specific.
It's, yeah, the CIP document is fairly unwieldy in and of itself. So I will just go through the sanitary projects and then we'll hop through water and then IPL will go. So sanitary, I'm gonna follow them off my budget slides and not necessarily in the order because again, you've got all municipal services projects here, which include streets, storm, sidewalks, things we facilitate for parks and everyone else. So sanitary projects. Start off with, well, the first two, trenchless technology and neighborhood projects. Both of those are annual projects that we just put money into the fund and to contribute to. $500,000 a year for trenchless and $250,000 for this next year for the neighborhood project. Trenchless tech is simply our program that we use to line our sanitary mains. We line them to extend their useful life. We have to catch them before the failures are too significant, but that effectively doubles their lifespan. And it's far cheaper than open cut digging. So if we can just put a liner in them while they're still in the ground, it saves money. It certainly is faster and it extends the life of the system. We are sitting at about 13% of our system being lined as we stand today. The neighborhood projects is just simply random sewer projects throughout the city that by themselves are very small and wouldn't necessarily attract a contractor or very good bid results. So we package those together and send them out as an entire projects package. We do that, this is probably on. We do the same thing on the storm side. Just gets us better bid results in the end and lets us do a greater amount of projects with the same money. So again, we put that money aside every year for those. The Upper Adair Interceptor, that is a sanitary sewer main that goes under Nolan and I-70. So it will be costly. This is just a portion that's being put in this year. That's going to be ultimately $1 million to replace, which I think you see that total in the CIP document. $500,000 this year and $500,000 the following year. As you can imagine, going on under I-70 is a costly venture. We will try to do that. We're looking at putting in a parallel pipe, which we normally try not to do, but it is known capacity issue with that pipe, so we do need to expand the capacity in addition to just replace the line. So we're looking to line one and add a second. The Spring Branch Garage Complex, you'll see this in both water and sewer. This is, and as I'm involved with all of these vertical construction projects for fire and police and everything else, boy, is the cost to build a building skyrocketing. We started the fire projects looking at roughly $675 a square foot to build, and apparently now the national average is up to $711 per square foot to build. And that's our fire station, so not insane finishes, right? So the point of the Spring Branch Garage Complex is to consolidate all of the operation centers that were public works, water pollution control, and water. So collectively, we would be ultimately shuttering 4 facilities and only have 1 to take care of. The age ranges of the buildings that would be closed as part of this date as far back as 1934, and that was be our street maintenance division and central garage. And that was actually originally built as a trolley turn station. One of the unique things about our facility inventory is very, very few of the buildings that we inhabit were actually designed for the purpose in which we use them. That one is certainly no exception and probably one of the more fun examples of that little fact. But so 1930s for street maintenance, 1940s for water, and sewer comes in as the young one in the 1970s. So be closing those facilities ultimately. This also is a multi-year project, as I believe the initial bid for that was not bid, we never took it out to bid, but the original engineer's estimate for that was roughly 16 million and we're up to 46. So, you know, Golden Acres sanitary improvements, this is actually a relocation project. We have several sanitary mains that are not only parallel and don't necessarily serve a purpose, but also many of those mains go under structures in that subdivision. And so, as you can imagine, it's not ideal to have pipeline under houses, sheds, garages, and things like that. So we have programs to remove them when we find them, or can just get around to them. So these are at an age and time when it is time to relocate them. So we will be reducing the number of mains and consequently the amount of maintenance that has to happen in that subdivision, upsizing the newer mains and getting them out from under structures. 24th and Scott is also a relocation for the same reason. Mains under structures. Dump truck replacement is replacing a 19-year-old asset. So just simple replacement there. Lateral reroute replacement program. We do have a lateral repair program that's part of operations, but separate from that in CIP is for these jobs when we do have to move mains and consequently move laterals. That's on us, not the homeowner. For us, if we've relocated their main and changed where their lateral has to hook up, this covers those relocations. And then the city center renovation, this is, so Municipal Commons is the official name of the old Kiha facility. This is the sanitary portion, is $250, and there's a matching water portion, $250 for the utility specific, i.e. customer service, and the utility specific staff in that facility. That was originally projected to be a $3 million number, and now it's collectively among the utilities only $1 million. So I was pretty excited about that. I know. So hurrah. And then, so those are all on the collection system side. And then on the treatment side, we've got an annual piping rehabilitation. We've been putting $200,000 a year into that for several years. That's piping throughout all of our facilities, but especially at the treatment plant. As you can imagine, sanitary sewage is corrosive, a lot of hydrogen sulfide, and it eats away not only at our equipment, but just the piping that carries it through the plant. So this is just an annual maintenance item. The sludge thickening process improvements. If you've ever come out to Rock Creek, we have these they look like giant dumpsters. They are full of sludge, and they are DAF units. It's dissolved air flotation, and it's the process by which we thicken sludge so we can very ultimately, land apply it. It's the first stage in dewatering. Those are original to the plant, so they're creeping up on 50 years old, and certainly not an efficient method of treatment anymore. And so we are looking at alternative methods. So the money, this is $2 million project, it's a big deal. That is currently under design right now, and this is for the actual unit of process replacement. The VFD replacement, we have collectively 7 VFDs at Rock Creek Pump Station and Sugar Creek Pump Station that need to be replaced. This will replace 2 of those, 1 at each station, and we will continue to replace them as needed. They are also original to the plants and those stations. So parts are not easy to come by anymore, so we're just starting to replace.
Is it VFD?
Yes, variable frequency drive. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with acronyms, and you'll find a lot of them.
Well,
Variable frequency
I
drive.
had come up with a different one, but we'll go on.
Yep. Good call. Rock Creek Pump Station pump replacement. This replaces 2 pumps and 4 valves at one of the 2 primary pump stations that feeds Rock Creek Treatment Plant, and the PTB scraper. I tell you, we love our acronyms. Primary thickening basin. And as glamorous as it is, we have things float to the top. It scrapes them off. The scraper is also original and quite corroded, as is its control mechanism. So this is a replacement for that piece of equipment. Any questions on the sanitary side?
Well, I've got a couple of questions here, just a couple of things on the list here.
Mhm.
Caboose security?
Huh?
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Oh, never mind. That's under tourism.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody
I have no.
Was that
hence the,
CYA?
huh?
Caboose security is another name for CYA? Okay. Well, I've been over here checking off things that was on the wrong list. Okay. Carry on.
All right.
Got one quick one.
Yeah.
I see the Spring Branch Garage Complex. I know what you were saying about it. It's on here twice.
So it's on there for water, it's on there for sewer, and you'll actually see it, if you look through that whole document, you'll see it for storm and for streets.
Okay.
And
the-
you'll see a general fund component. So basically every fund that will be represented at that building is kicking in.
So the 2.14 is.
The sanitary portion, and there's a matching water portion.
Okay.
And we've been contributing, this will be year 3 that we've been contributing to that project. Okay, water side. Main replacement program. This you will see step up if you look at the outlying years in the CIP document. It's over 30 million in the next 6 years. We will see how quickly that actually ramps up, but planning 2 million in main replacement. Goal is to replace a minimum of 1% of the system every year. Targeting, of course, the mains that we experience breaks on most frequently. All of our mains are ductile to date, and that has served us pretty well. We will possibly install HDPE or C909 piping, possibly in the future, depending on the certain application, but and pressure ratings and all the things. But that is just main replacement program, and again, you'll see that for years to come. Future production wells is similar. This is actually year 1, and then next year is another $1 million to keep adding wells as we wells age like equipment does. Nobody really thinks about it, but they do. So ultimately, their production gets down to not producing enough water to keep it in service. We close that well off and we open a new one. So this is just digging those new wells. Production maintenance building. We have one that houses some smaller equipment at Courtney Bend. This is just to replace that structure. Like I said, those date back to the 40s and haven't been spectacularly maintained, so it's time. Basin drive improvements. Those are the control systems for the water basins at Courtney Bend as well. Just the control mechanism that, as it says, drives the equipment. There are 14 total. This will do a couple of them. We don't like to replace all of anything at once, so we stagger replacements over the years, so they don't all age out together. Spring Branch Garage Complex again. Another one, M291 Wellfield header. We're adding a second header pipe on the north wellfield. Header pipe is think collector, so it will improve the capacity of the north wellfield. So it's effectively a secondary pipe that lets all the well production drain into it and carry it to Courtney Bend. Ammonia feeder improvements. This is just replacing aging piping associated with the addition of ammonia to the water. Ammonia, while it sounds scary that it's in our water, it actually helps the chlorine be more effective and reduces the formation of disinfection byproducts, which can be harmful to your health. The next 2 are Courtney Bend operations building upgrades and Courtney Bend valve improvements. Again, just aging infrastructure that we're replacing and upgrading. Another acronym, HSP overhaul, high service pump. So high service pumps would be the pumps that after all the water in the plant has treated and it's ready to go out to the system, high service are the pumps that put it directly into the distribution system. And this is to replace, that's $400,000 to replace 2 of those as well. Service line upgrades, this one is a federal mandate. So we will see if things change, but there's a new lead and copper rule. And that rule mandates that the city is on the hook for replacing service lines all the way to the house. Yeah, very yes, and very, very, very costly. So this is $160,000, but you'll see that ramp up to a full $1 million for several years. If this rule doesn't change, there's a lot of opposition to it, as you can imagine. That has the city potentially replacing private infrastructure, which we don't typically get into. The city only owns it to the meter. Also, it requires mains to be replaced that aren't known to be lead. If we have anything that's unknown in our system, we have to replace it as well. So, like I said, very costly and not something we have a choice to do at this moment. We have a backhoe replacement for another 20-year-old piece of equipment. And those backhoes at water definitely get their use with all the main replacements. We did 255 main breaks last year. There's also a truck with a service body replacement, again, just replacing old equipment, and then the same thing, the city center renovation. So those are the water projects for next year. Do you have any questions on any of those that I can answer?
This budget that you've set, is that, would that be just a normal budget? Is it got anything with the GO bond?
Neither water nor sewer have any GeoBond components.
Okay.
And this is pretty standard CIP, definitely standard CIP on the sanitary side. The water main replacement program is really just started in the last couple years. So it's still at its intro phases. And I said we ramp up the amount over time, but that's the newest thing. In the grand scheme of the CIP, it adds 2 million to what would have been 7. So a little higher than it has been in the last, 5.
Any questions on that side of that business? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to start with Caboose Security. No, I'm just kidding.
There's got to be a story there.
Not
That's the
gonna be-
caboose at McDonald's on 24 Highway.
Not gonna be told by me, whatever that story is. So I'm gonna go down through the list here of the power and light projects on these sheets.
Good idea.
And if you guys, I'm mainly gonna hit the ones that are impacting next fiscal year. If you guys have questions on things going outward, I'll be more than happy to try to answer them. We're pretty constructive, when we go to name projects, because most of the time, they're literally what they say they're for, so, yeah. So substation fiber optic network replacement is literal replacements of some fiber optics. Substation modeling is electrical services that are gonna model our substations and help us understand where infrastructure maybe needs to be upgraded or updated. Transmission pole replacement program, a couple of years ago, we did a big engineering study that graded kind of all of our poles around the city and said, hey, here's some that need attention now, here's some that need attention down the road. So this is a targeted replacement program. Down the road, you'll see an emergency replacement, and that's the ones that we hit with cars. Let's see here. Desert Storm switchgear cabinets just sounds really cool. It's just the color of the cabinets. They're just transmission switchgear. They're targeted switchgear replacements out in the field. Let's see here. The next, their traffic signal detection systems is a continuation of upgrade of those. The next 4 really has to deal with sub S and out at the North Point development. And those next 4 projects equate up to $6.5 million for the next fiscal year. So that's pretty big. Service center upgrades is continuing to upgrade. Our service center, is getting pretty aged and pretty outdated. And for our staff out there, I think it's important to continue to upgrade that facility and bring it up to some modern terms. Blue Valley chimney demolition. So this one's kind of interesting. Probably haven't even been able to fill you in on that. We just got the numbers back from the engineering study. Remember, we hired Burns and Mac to they've done a bunch of these stack demolitions. So they went out and they've gotten kind of some more closer bids and some more information. It's a little more than twice this price. So what we're gonna do is we'll collect up a couple of years. We do an annual survey of that stack, so it's not at risk of just falling down or crumbling or anything like that. So we could push this project out a couple of years, but now I'm gonna need to collect some money up a couple of years and we'll still target that maybe in the future. Substation battery chargers are a new style battery charger. It's gonna help us meet some federal compliance issues through FERC at our substations. Service center exterior upgrades is continuing that service center. 161 line terminal and control building at sub A is part of the battery installation you guys have heard about out there at sub A and help them connect to the grid. And some of that, if not all of that money, will be reimbursed to us through our transmission connection agreement with them. The next one's a big hitter, right? Replacement of 400 MVA substation transformers. Some of those transformers are 50 years old. They've been there a long time. So it's time to start strategically replacing those. Emergency replacement of transmission poles, that's the one I said, depends on how many we hit. We try to order those without big X marks on them, but we continue to take those down. Emergency maintenance production, items like gearboxes and big capital items that are on our 6 combustion turbines throughout the city. Sometimes we have maintenance replacements on those, so we keep a fund ready for that. Substation and transmission upgrade replacements is really just, again, what it says. So emergency breakdowns of equipment in our substations that are capital in nature. T&D road improvements, we found several years ago that there's a lot of projects that kind of spur up where MoDOT will replace a section of road or something, and it'll impact our entrance to our substation. So we'll have to go back in and regrade or regravel and touch that back up. So we have a sum of money sitting there so that we can do that, since that's a capital item. T&D improvements, really, again, unknown replacements of transformers that burn up, distribution and otherwise. Fleet, vehicle and equipment, 10-year replacement program, bucket trucks and equipment like those big heavy equipment are getting more expensive and longer lead times. So we order things now to hopefully get them in 3 to 5 years. Remote terminal upgrade is a NERC compliance issue. I could go into the specifics, but it's even over my head. I trust my SCADA guys to know what that's needed there. And then service center, data center modernization. So if you think about where our trouble dispatchers and our transmission system operators sit every day, it looks like it's out of a 1980s movie. It hasn't been upgraded in a really long time, and if you go into any modern control room nowadays, they're just really upgraded, have a lot of newer technology that are available for our operators. And so this is really the beginning of that project, to kind of do an engineering study so that we know how much money to put out there in the future and begin upgrading that facility so that we can move forward with technology and be a modern utility for everybody. Sub-R Country Meadows, new 13 kV feeder. That's a really good one. So if everybody remembers, we had that big storm where Country Meadows was down for a pretty extended period of time. Working with our T&D and engineering folks, this is going to feed a 13 kV feeder along the south edge of Country Meadows. And this isn't just for Country Meadows. There's a bunch of subdivisions all along there. That this will provide an alternate feed, that if we had another storm or case like that, it'll provide a redundancy there and be able to get those folks back on quicker. Then we have a perimeter fence replacement, and then a little more fiber optic network upgrades. So to kind of get ahead of your question, Les, when you say, is this a normal year? So as you can see, our total is around a little over $23.5 million. A typical year for us is around 8 to 10, I would say. If you take out the sub-S stuff, which is $6.5 million, and then that 400 MVA transformers, which is $8.5 million, then we're right at about $8.8 million, which is a typical year for us. So we just have a couple big projects there that are really adding to the base.
Okay. Any questions? Looks like both groups have got their work cut out for them this next year. I mean, really, with these projects. Okay, I appreciate the update on the capital improvements. Next item, finance and admin. I see we have a new finance and admin person.
Yeah, I do want to take a moment to introduce Amy Finch is our new utility finance manager. So excited to have her on board. She's been here a whopping 4 weeks, so she's ready to answer any question this board has. Any and all
In her 4 weeks of knowledge,
Right.
she's ready to answer.
No, I don't want to do that to her. I did want to bring her down and introduce her, but if there's any questions between the two of us, we would be able to answer that.
Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So, anything special we need to look at on the finances? Anything pop out that was unusual?
No.
So I will say real quick, sorry.
No, go
Am I
ahead.
good?
Yeah.
With Power and Light, you're seeing the positive, 12.7 million, and it looks like our reserve balance is growing quite a bit. I will say that's missing a lot of capital project money for the current fiscal year that maybe hasn't cleared yet. We just spent $5 million on some transformers for Substation S, and there's some other things outstanding there. The FERC 881 stuff is coming out straight out of reserves, so
On the transformers, what kind of lead time do you have on those now?
we're expecting those in 2028, I believe.
I just want people to understand, they're not like you call it to Lowe's and you go pick it up. It's something that's gonna take a while to
Yeah.
build and source.
So one of Amy's goals will be, we're going to try to make some better financial reports that are just as informative, but maybe a little more optics too, to help us visualize and see. So that's one of the things she's going to be working on with us, is to try to come up with some better reporting so that we all have some better data to look at and make it a little more presentable, I guess is the right word.
Very good. From municipal services?
Nothing crazy, and I did speak with our finance director prior to the meeting. She didn't have anything that stood out to her as crazy. We're ahead of the game in revenue, which is where you want to be. Part of that, and we always budget conservatively, but interest income, we talked about this at Stormwater last night as well, but we have been exceeding there quite a bit, but we always budget on the conservative side because that is not a guarantee. So while we don't always factor quite that number in, you can see we're nearly 250% above budget, but very volatile. So that was just kind of one of the things that had come up lately. But no, water and sewer are right where they should be on expenses and a little ahead of the game on revenue.
And we know how quickly that can change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any questions on finances? Amy, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We can answer any questions or make more work for you, we will. Okay, municipal services, anything else you want to report on?
Nothing crazy, I don't think. We've got a lot going on, especially at the plant, but it's all business as usual, really.
And new member at the end, and one from that's not here today. We need to try to get some tours set up when the weather warms up a little bit for them to see the operations, because it really does help a lot when you see what we're talking about, all the acronyms.
We have so many more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but it's a BFD. Okay, IPL.
Yes, so I do have a couple things before we get to the AMI update.
Okay.
So I've done a little bit of traveling here lately, and I kind of wanted to talk about where I've been going and what I've been doing. So one of those was I went to Washington, D.C., actually with Councilmember Fears joined me on that, and that was a American Public Power Association, so APPA legislative rally. So we actually traveled to D.C., went and visited. We had our own rally and talked about some of the issues that are hindering municipal utilities today, and also met with a bunch of legislators, both representatives and senators, mostly their staff. If you can imagine, right now DC is pretty buzzing, so it's hard to tackle down an actual representative. But we did get to visit with a couple. You know, there's a lot of items going on, so not that we just go there and, I don't want to say blindly talk, but there's strategic things that are happening in DC that I personally have to keep tabs on through as a municipal. So just to give you guys some ideas of some of the things that are happening, one is environmental restrictions on meeting increasing load demand, right? So as data centers want to come and the EPA puts more restrictions on what you can do to produce power, we have to be able to regulate that. And also the last represented group really put in a lot of goals, for carbon neutrality and everything. And those were pretty tight timelines and pretty hard for any organization to accomplish, more or less ones that have to operate in the confines that we do. Another thing is this was on the chopping block as a discussion point, I believe, early on in the budget talks, that they were talking about tax-free financing. As a municipality, we get to take advantage of tax-free financing for bonds and other types of things. And it's not just IPL, that's really the city as a whole. So we were talking to the representatives about that's a big concern and can cost our residents a lot of money if we're not continuing to take advantage of that type of opportunity. Another thing, when the government puts out programs like the Investment Recovery Act, let's take that one for example, and they say, hey, if you go do transmission upgrades, we'll give you a tax break of X dollars, you know, a percentage of your project. Well, as a non-tax paying entity, I can't really use a tax break. That doesn't really help me. So in the past, they've been able to give cash payments in lieu of a tax break, and we need to make sure that we can continue to receive those so that our customers can benefit just the same as an IOUs and that they don't have that leverage over us. Supply chain issues, we already talked about that, right? Those continue to impact us not only by timing, but by price. Things are increasing at dramatic levels, you know, continually. And then permitting policies to get generation to market. If I want to bring a data center, it wants to be here in 3 years, and I sit 4 years in a permitting, you know, confines waiting for them to give me the green light, and then I got to build generation after that, it hinders our ability to be able to grow economically. So those are some of the things that we're getting in front of federal and state legislators, saying, hey, we need help in these different venues, and we need you guys to be aware of how that could impact your residents. After that, I came back and immediately went to Texas to a Southwest Power Pool meeting. So Southwest Power Pool, along with those policy positions, right, they're the ones that hold the cards for a generator interconnect. So if we said, hey, let's go build some turbines and increase our generation, well, their ability to give you a green light on an engineering study in the past used to take four years plus. And now they're trying to tighten that up, but we needed to hear and talk to them about what are their plans to be able to help that pipeline and get studies through in a quicker fashion. So those, I mean, are a couple of the things that I've been out traveling around talking to different things, and also to hear what's being discussed and on a federal, on a state, and then from our regional transmission operator. So as you can tell, there's a lot of different avenues that IPL can be impacted by, and it takes a lot of manpower to try to keep those on check. We're continuing discussions with UET and Rainbow, so I just wanted you guys to know that those discussions are continuing. I don't have anything firm in front of you to say, hey, here's a pricing agreement today, but I wanted you to know that those discussions are continuing, and that they have put in their generator interconnect queue agreement. Let's see here. I'm continuing with the large customer meetings, and Ricky and I have met with a few different companies to talk about the integrated resource plan that I committed to you guys that I would try to do. So we have a couple solutions at the table, and we're going to kind of hash those out of what's the best path for us to take, and we should be bringing that forward to you guys pretty soon. And then I'll turn it over to Ricky to kind of give a quick update on where we're at with AMI.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions on what Joe just mentioned before I start?
I wasn't going to give him time for questions.
Yeah, he was blown.
I wanted to make sure that he had his.
That was a lot. That was a lot. Does anybody have any questions? Seriously.
Yeah, a lot going on.
There's a lot
It's good
going
to see at least you're out with your ear to the ground and with these agencies and organizations.
Yeah, and just maybe transitioning to AMI as being a pivotal input to a lot of the decision-making that has to happen in order for us to be able to think about any of what Joe talked about, right? Is us becoming more intimately familiar with the demand and the usage of our service is something that can benefit us in many, many different forums. So this is a project that we talked about in the last PUAB. It was an effort that was resurrected and dusted off, and kind of a new approach. And so I'll just kind of reset on that and then give a quick update about where we're at. So the approach is kind of multi-pronged. The first phase would be us issuing an RFP for us to procure a program and performance management firm that could help us with kind of formulating the ecosystem of what AMI is going to look like. So strategy, thinking through a lot of the scenarios, really, if I can encapsulate it in a couple words, it's taking a thoughtful and methodical approach towards how we approach AMI. Sure, there's AMI out there, and we can get fixated and infatuated with the latest technology and how we, just replace our meters and our infrastructure. But we wanted to really think through, there's a lot of different pieces to this and a lot of different people that are involved, whether it's our residents, our customers, our internal stakeholders, external. So we have to be thoughtful in all arenas, and this firm is really going to help us do that. So there's kind of three parts to what we're looking to do with this RFP. We're going to review and update the previously composed RFP that was really about procuring the meters and the comms infrastructure. So kind of dusting that off and making sure that it reflects the latest industry standards and requirements. And then once we selected a vendor down the road, they would work alongside us and the AMI vendor from an accountability standpoint to ensure that the contract and the things that we worked through very thoughtfully, that there's accountability to them, there's metrics, and then reporting back to whether it's internal stakeholders, council members, residents, what have you, that we've got the reporting and communication tools for us to be able to effectively kind of communicate progress along the way. That's kind of the oversight and compliance component of it. I can kind of go through some of the components of the RFP, but I'll just lay out the timeline and then see if there's any questions, and then I can go through it. So we intend to issue the RFP on March 24th, so next week. We would allow for about a month worth of submissions. In between time, we plan on having a pre-proposal conference. So this conference would be a webinar where we would kind of discuss the scope, what our desires are, what we're looking for, give the ability to ask any questions that they might have so they can submit a thorough proposal to us. And then we would have those proposals due April 25th. We're targeting to go to council in June. That would be the June 2nd. And then looking at potentially awarding right after that. So we kind of worked back from the June 2nd council date and then built in a buffer of about a month or so to get there. So I'd say that we've spent the last, 2.5 months just kind of strategizing through what this approach would be, putting together an RFP that we felt was comprehensive enough for us to capture the requirements and the things that we're looking for, and then working with our procurement partners internally to ensure that it's in the right format and it's ready to publish. So I can pause there, and if there's any more specifics on kind of what's contained within the RFP, I certainly can get into that, but that's the high-level overview.
Anybody have any questions?
Might be premature. Are you going further with what you're talking about, or?
Go ahead if you have.
Okay,
Sure, yeah.
well,
Thank you.
so with the, if it's due April 25th, once you pick the company that's going to help you with that, do you have any just kind of an idea how long before you start looking at vendors? Or is that still way out?
For the actual AMI vendor? Is that
Yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, I think we would immediately on board. So if you think in June that we award, we're going to probably start meeting in June and July to start having discussions internally, meeting folks, getting them to understand our organization, our city, right, things like that. And so you've got 2-3 weeks worth of intake.
Okay.
And then from there, the immediate focus starts to shift into, let's evaluate the old RFP and see what's useful there and what's still relevant and what we need to freshen up. And so if you think of their phases that they might go through, they're going to do a lot of internal discovery. That might be interviewing people, attending meetings like this, taking input, and then going and doing a gap analysis of what was old versus what's new and relevant and what they've heard. And then thinking about, okay, now we turn this into an RFP, you've got a similar time frame, and then you get to your vendor. So if you build a couple months of that inventory and dusting off the RFP, you're probably towards the end of the year before you're issuing the next RFP. That's just a high level, off the top of my
Right,
head
right.
answer to your question.
Right. So with that, and I know I've asked this before, but at what point do we have to know if we even have the money to do that? When we go looking for vendors, when are we gonna know where the money's coming from?
I mean, I think that's part of the evaluation from the program manager, right? So once we onboard them, that's part of those discussions is what does the dollars look like? What does, and like he said, public interaction of what does the public want from this? What does our stakeholders want from this? What does the utility hope to gain from this, right? So I think those discussions of dollars and understanding, there's several different generations of AMI meters out there nowadays, and there's AMR meters. And so that evaluation of, okay, you could go to the newest, latest, greatest thing, and it does all of these, but is that worth the money of going to the generation before it that maybe doesn't do a couple of the things? It's no different than going and picking out your new cell phone. Do I get the latest, greatest, or do I get last year's model? But I understand that it doesn't do a couple of things, but is that worth the money to us and our residents, and is that the best value for our dollar? I think all those are part of that. Once we get that program manager, those discussions will be occurring again with us, with stakeholders, with this group, with all kinds of others, to understand what the business case is around that, so that we can present that to council as well.
Right.
Once you go and you bid the meters, then there's the whole business case of does this program make sense at all, right? So I think that's part of their job and their scope is to help us weed that out.
And part of the reason I asked that is because when I look through the CIP over 5 years, it added up on the sheet. It was like 132 million. I think I added up like 128 million. But that's a lot of money, and then you add several million on top of that for AMI. So that's why I keep asking that. So thanks, appreciate it.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is Deputy City Manager.
I think we've covered pretty much everything I have, but if you have questions you've thought of while we're sitting here, I'm
Yeah.
happy to answer them.
Caboose Security.
Security. I just sat through Parks and Rec's, it's at a historic site, and it's been rehabbed. I sat through their budget presentation today, and they're actually scaling back the security of it, so it might not even be that much money.
Oh, okay. So the CYA is gonna go down.
I actually thought you said moose security to begin with. I'm like, huh?
Well, nothing would surprise me. Okay, thank you. Board member comments.
Can we ask a question and comments?
Yes.
I don't know if you have anything, Director, but the data center, is there anything to share with us on this potential data center out there?
Other than talks continue, I really probably can't share.
Yeah.
I can't share a whole lot. Discussions continue, and data centers are turning over every rock under this country to try to find a place that they could plug in. So I really can't share much more than that.
I'll throw out a question/comment. In our packet, we had a form to fill out for a day of training they want to do like in April, that everybody on a board and a commission is going to have to do. So make sure you get those forms signed and I guess turned into you, Christine, is that who they go back to? And then they'll schedule that appropriately. And I know from a couple of boards I'm on, Stormwater sent the same thing out. So hopefully I can just go once and don't have to go twice. But if I keep talking about caboose security and moose security, I may have to.
You'll be going every time.
I may be. Okay, so that was really just the question I have is make sure, or comment, just make sure you get those turned in so we can get that scheduled. Next meeting date, oh, well, let me throw it over to our council member Fears.
Sure. Well, I already mentioned a couple things have already been mentioned. One was I was just gonna mention that meeting on governance that the council's gonna have. And I was gonna talk about the trip that Joe and I made to Washington DC. And I just would kind of mention maybe in that regard, obviously that was my first time. It was, and I think I mentioned to this group before, I'm now on the Policymakers Council for the APPA. And so that was my first trip. It was a very educational trip for me, for one thing. But the other thing I think that is helpful for this group and citizens to understand is that most of the public power organizations send elected officials to that event because I think primarily because when we go to Washington DC and talk to our representatives and senators, that for us to think it's worthwhile enough to send an elected official there, that's kind of well received, I think. And we did spend a lot of time with those, both the staffers and one of the representatives and a senator, to just try to help them understand the issues that power companies in general, public power is really trying to address and deal with. And Joe talked about a fair amount of those when he was visiting, so I won't rehash those. But I do think it's really important that this group understand, that presence there is important. The only other thing I would really have to add to anything is that yesterday at the Audit and Finance Committee meeting yesterday afternoon, right here in this room, we did have a presentation by our management analyst about utility billing. And he had done a analysis of that system and that program. Might be worthwhile watching that if you all are interested. But that's really the only other thing I had for today.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. I understand from your trip too that out of, what is it, like 2,000 munis across the country, Independence is in the top 100? That's something that we need to be bragging about.
Yeah, that was new information to me. Maybe it shouldn't have been. I don't know, but it was new information that I learned in the process. But that was just an interesting side note from that trip, I guess I would say.
Very good. Celebrate our successes. Okay, any other comments from anybody? Okay. Next meeting date is April 17th, 2025 in the same room at the same time. So looking for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second? And a third? No, I thought, let's try. Okay, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.